Hi, welcome to SIOR Live. I'm John Celestri, and we're here in the show floor of the SIOR Spring Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm really happy to have not an old friend, but a relatively new friend, Gabriel Silverstein of Angelic Real Estate in New York. Gabriel, good to see you.
Thank you, John.
Pleasure. It's always a pleasure for me, too. The SIOR Index, got it right in 2006 and 2007?
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
It did. So in 2006, the SIOR index was flatline. And at the beginning of 2007, particularly on the West Coast participants, it started to trend a little bit downward. And as an industry, we kept going all the way off the cliff.
Right.
And largely would argue didn't really call a downturn come until 2008. But the index clearly told us ahead of time that in fact we were already starting down.
Interesting.
And it's a diffusion index, which for those that aren't familiar
which means what?
It's a survey of a lot of people who individually are focused on their own individual market.
Right.
But then the data is collated and it extrapolates back. It allows us to zoom back and look from a high level. And so while people are giving their individual experiences into the index, those experiences are all being totaled together to show trends.
So here was this major bell ringing that there's this iceberg approaching, and nobody steers the ship away. How could we miss that as an industry?
I think as an industry, we are historically very bad at recognizing things until we've gone headlong off the cliff. I don't know that that's unique, frankly, to real estate.
Although brokers tend to be very, very optimistic, sometimes irrational.
And even more than brokers, I would argue developers. But for those who know anything about development, if you're not an optimistic developer, you're not going to be a developer very long, because the stomach it takes in general better involves some optimism, or you can't get through the night.
Yeah. It seems in this period in the upcycle, from virtually everybody I've spoken with in every certainly major market in the nation, that we're kind of creating a society of haves and have-nots, where you can move into this gateway city, and if you're rich, you're going to do fine. And probably on the multifamily side, if you're poor, you're going to do fine. There'll be affordable help for you.
Right.
And the middle class is going away. How does that reconcile with a quote-unquote upcycle?
I think it's a challenge that a free market economy faces, and so we do help those that are at the lowest economic rungs with affordable housing, with other things that help them get by. In New York City, Mayor de Blasio has got a huge proponent of, he wants 200,000 affordable housing units to be created in the next decade. It's a very big topic in New York real estate circles, and the argument in part is that if everybody else wants to have dinner, you got to have somebody to serve it. You can't just have an island full of the uber wealthy. Because at some point, the worker can't afford to take a 2-hour commute each way to get minimum wage. Mm-hmm. So you have to have an integrated, seamless society. And yes, so economics favors the supply and demand. The money with the most money will drive up prices on the high side, and societally we provide for the low side. But it's really hard to do that in the middle.
Right. Sadly so. Underwriting. We've talked about this before. We've heard quite a few people, and this is where the market schizophrenia comes in, and you and I have discussed this before too. Some people are saying, no, underwriting, absolutely fine. Others are saying, it's getting sloppy. What are you saying?
It is absolutely trending to a more ebullient.
I like that.
It was a big word for me today after all these meetings. But it is maybe getting a little more optimistic than it's getting to a point where I think people are starting to feel a concern. Mm-hmm. And in the challenge of getting money out the door, even as people think their underwriting is getting a little bit too optimistic, they don't have a choice, because if they don't do it, they'll lose deals. Mm-hmm. And that's a risk point. And I think one of the comments that we've talked about before is the thing that to me is the best sign right now in that regard is that people are afraid of it. And fear helps keep them a little bit in check. I think the moment that goes away, we will get ourselves into trouble. So I hope that that fear will continue to keep some restraint on underwriting.
Right. Have you been watching the index, and do you have a sense of outlook or longevity of the upcycle? What's the outlook?
From an index standpoint, the index has been very, very consistently trending upward for several years now. No spike, no leveling off. I think in the baseball analogy people like so much, last year to me felt like the fourth inning. I think we're in the fifth inning now. I think that has continued a progression. I know Sam Zell loves to say that we average 9-year cycles. I think the most difficult thing right now is trying to figure out where did this cycle really start, because while the Fed may say we came out of a recession back 2009-ish, I don't know that any of us would agree that we really started anywhere positive for direction in 2009.
Definitely.
So, where do you start the clock?
Right.
I'm not sure, but I do think that we have several more years of positive growth and momentum to capture. And again, I put it in the fifth inning right now.
Given the oddity of the way the upcycle started, and it's what your reference is, when the clock started, we also don't know by traditional parameters when the clock is going to stop, because we don't know how different this upcycle is, really, because so many of the parameters seem to be changing. Is that fair to say?
I think it is, and I think the other challenge is that rarely are two recessions or downturns caused and triggered, maybe more than caused, but triggered by the same thing.
Right.
So we can focus on subprime last time. I know one of the concerns right now is, are we getting into another tech bubble like we had 99, 2000?
Second time I've heard that today. Interesting.
That's a real question, I think. Tech has driven a lot, particularly in the office, to the extent that there's been some real office recovery. I think that's been largely a tech-driven recovery, even in places like New York that weren't traditionally that, but also places like Denver and Boston and San Francisco. And so is tech getting ahead of itself, both in a stock market capitalization kind of way, and perhaps in how quickly that's allowing them to gobble up space and help the office market? That is definitely one potential tipping point.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We'll have to talk next year.
I look forward to it.
We're in the sixth inning.
Probably.
At that point.
All right.
Gabriel,
thank you, John.
It's always a pleasure. And I want to thank you for joining us on Globe Street TV.